I have seen up close the costs of misusing expertise or not using expertise. Think about what happened when Thabo Mbeki in South Africa refused to accept that HIV was caused by a virus and was instead caused by, he thought, malnutrition and poverty. 300,000 people died in South Africa unnecessarily because of his refusal to fund treatment. 35,000 babies were born in South Africa with HIV that could have been prevented had they been given access to medicine. So here in the UK, the furor about vaccines and the link between, alleged link between MMR and autism. When we reached a stage where only 80% of children were vaccinated, and we had a mumps epidemic in 2005 because of misinformation that was spread and a misuse of expert opinion. But I've also seen the really good side of when expert opinion and expert advice is used wisely in the policymaking process. You know, if you think about what we've achieved in terms of life expectancy, since 1950, we all live 20 years longer than we used to. That's 20 years of additional life that we all have as a result of increases in income and medical interventions and investments in things like water and sanitation. In that same time period, average global incomes have increased 20-fold because economic policies around the world have improved. And so I've seen the benefits of the good application of expert advice in policymaking, and I've seen the negative effects of not doing so. So the reformation that I would like to see is more and better expertise for evidence-based policymaking, and not policymaking that's driven by emotion and prejudice. And I know that we're in a period in which that is being questioned and challenged for a number of reasons, because of populist politics, because of technological failures, because of technological changes, and also because of some examples of expert failure. And so I think what we need to do is think about a reform to several things. First, reforms in the way experts operate and influence policymaking. Second, reforms in the way that those who mediate expertise, be they the media, politicians, and social media in particular, operate. And then finally, we need a change in what citizens expect, both of themselves and of the political leaders that they elect. I think if we don't, I think this is so vital, because the only way that policymakers and politicians can legitimately delegate and rely on expert opinion in influencing policy is if there's public consent for that. And I think what we need to do in the years ahead is to rebuild that public consent and rebuild the trustworthiness of experts. Otherwise, we risk losing all of the kinds of benefits that we've seen in recent decades.
It's very hard to disagree with any of that, but let me try and push you, because that's what journalists are supposed to do, and let's break it down a little bit and start with, how big is the problem actually? I mean, how far does this skepticism of experts go? There's a lot of skepticism of economists, but frankly, you know, economists, as the Queen said, failed to foresee the 2007-2008 financial crisis. Quite a lot of expert predictions about the economy appear to have not happened. So let's put economists in one box, and I'll ask you if that's justified, but how much broader does it go? I mean, you mentioned MMR, but you know, broadly, we still trust our doctors, don't we? We still trust, well, actually, I was about to say we still trust scientists, but in fact, there are quite a lot of climate change deniers out there. So just set out the parameters of how big the problem is.
Yeah. I mean, I do think that economists face a particular challenge for two reasons. One, because of the 2008 financial crisis, and it's important to put that in historical context. It is common in history when you have a major economic crisis to have a kind of populist backlash thereafter, and I think we're witnessing some of that. And also, I think there's a lot of questioning of economists' ability to forecast, and economists' forecasts have been questioned. So economists are being criticized for failing to predict, and also that they have, in some sense, been complicit in an economic system which has affected many people adversely. Having said that, and it's interesting, the Queen, when she made a visit to the London School of Economics, and she asked, how come you didn't see this coming? And the economists were stumped, but then they wrote a letter, which you can read, which is published, explaining why it was a failure of imagination, was what they said. a failure of imagination to see the interconnections between the economy. But it isn't, and I think since then, to be fair, economists have done a huge amount of soul searching, and the last decade of economic research has been to really learn the lessons of that crisis, and I'm happy to talk about those. But it isn't just economists, it's pollsters, it's the health profession and the debate about vaccines or what causes cancers, it's climate deniers. That confidence and trust in institutions is widespread. It's interesting that the Edelman Trust Barometer for 2017, which is a publication that monitors levels of trust over time, recorded the largest ever drop in trust in institutions, including government, business, charities, and the media in 2017. So it is much bigger than the narrow question of trust in economists.
And we'll get on to whether this decline of trust in experts is a sort of symptom of a broader decline of trust. But just on experts, isn't some healthy skepticism about conventional wisdom quite a good idea? I mean, look at Luther himself. I mean, you know, it's blindly following conventional wisdom or technocratic expertise isn't always a good idea. So isn't some of this backlash rather good?
Well, there is no doubt that the death of deference is a good thing. And we're in a very different era, and all of us are much more empowered and informed than we used to be. That is a good thing. You know, Macmillan once said, you know, we didn't overthrow the divine right of kings to bow before the divine right of experts. And that's certainly true. But I think we also need to acknowledge that we all accept an awful lot of expertise every day in our life. You know, every time you get into a car or onto a plane, you trust that the air traffic controller has been, you know, knows what he's doing. You trust that the other drivers have got licenses and that's been verified. You trust their cars have got proper MOT. So there is a huge amount of what I'd call quiet trust in expertise that exists in all of our society. But there are some very big and important issues which are very contested. And that's some of the ones
that's what you worry about. And in terms of what is at risk, there is a danger that this backlash against expertise goes so far that we no longer believe anything, whether it's, you know, pollsters or genuine experts. And you had a very good line in your speech about what evidence-based policy has brought us, where I'm going to steal your line from you now, but Minouche had a great line where she recalled the life of Brian. And do you remember that line? Actually, you can say it, but I can simply say, I'll be the guy from the Judean People's Liberation Front. So what have the experts ever done for us?
Well, besides medicine, clean water, sanitation, wine, modern healthcare, roads, et cetera, et cetera.
And so that's what gets you the scale of evidence-based policy making has brought us a lot. And your contention is that that is now at risk because of this backlash against experts. Correct. So let's, before we get to the solutions, because that's obviously the most important, what's caused this?
Yeah. Well, I think there certainly have been cases where experts have made mistakes. Now, of course, we always forget all the times that experts got it right. So I think we need a bit of balance. But I think another very important change is the role of technology. You know, the availability of information on the internet has empowered all of us and has been a hugely democratizing and positive force. But it's also meant that it's possible to propagate alternative facts. It's possible to live in a complete bubble that confirms all of your own prejudices. It's possible that you get trolled if you express a different point of view. And in some sense, social media has disintermediated experts. You know, think about restaurant reviews. It used to be that you would read expert restaurant reviewers' opinions before choosing where to go. Now you go and you have thousands of people who are like you, who've gone to restaurants, who've rated them, and it's a very democratizing force. But there are some very important differences between information and knowledge. There is a lot of information out there, but whether it's true knowledge is a different matter.
So partly experts themselves have messed up, partly it's technology. Let's stick on the experts messing up, and let's stick to the subject that you are a technocratic policymaker, really an economist technocrat. So give us some examples where you think your profession messed up.
Well, I think the financial crisis is probably the most glaring example. And I think there the fundamental error was economists thought up until the financial crisis that if the macroeconomy was in good shape, if you had low inflation and sound budgets, and if individual financial institutions were sound, everything would be fine. You would have macroeconomic stability, and you would have growth, and people would be better off. I think what the crisis showed us, and where there was a lack of imagination, was in understanding the interconnections. That even though that if you had one financial institution fail, that could have ripple effects across the entire financial system, and that could have ripple effects across the entire economy. So I think that is an example. I think since then, huge amounts of changes have been made in the way the financial system is supervised. More capital, more liquidity, more attention paid to those interconnections that will hopefully mean that you won't make that same mistake won't happen again.